Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Herculean Physique, I'm here with the one, the only, the mythical, the legendary Ryan Foley. Greetings, Ryan. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you for that intro. That's really good.
Well, you are. You're not only a legend in your own right, but you produce legendary stories to inspire and guide us. And that's awesome.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, it's been a busy couple of weeks, but I've had a lot of time to go through and get a lot of stuff done. How are things going on your end?
Pretty good. I'm experimenting all the time. I managed to lower my blood sugar again. I've experimented with some things that people said would lower blood sugar and they didn't. So I have to get back down to where it was before, and I'm almost there. And working out and meditating and spreading those throughout the day. So that's better. And now it's just basically the only issue I need to address is my spinal problems. So I've gotten a couple of books that tell you how to deal with spinal problems, and I'm going to start experimenting with those soon as well. And then I guess I'm meeting my challenges to the best of my ability, and we'll take it from there.
Well, good, good. I'm glad to hear all of that. And boy, this wasn't planned by you and I at all, but we're going to dovetail into something that is absolutely perfect, and I'm going to be really curious to get your opinion on it because it was an exercise that I discovered. And so, one, the name alone, but then also with what you were going through with the spinal stenosis, I'm curious to see if this exercise would help you, if it's something that you can do. But before we get there, one of the things that I like coming on here and talking with you about is the fact that so we're constantly trying to go through and make an improvement for ourselves.
Right.
We're trying to become the better version of ourselves, and we do that through lifting weights. And I think it's easy for people on the outside to see, well, what are these guys doing? Oh, they're just coming in and they're picking up heavy weight and they're setting it back down. And in a very simplified matter, yes, that's true. That's what we do is we go through and we pick up the weight, but there is a certain amount of science to it. It is a real legit science where the type of style that you train is going to dictate, the type of body that you're going to develop.
Right.
But that really is the key. So we're gonna lift the weight, we're gonna carry it, and then we're gonna set it back down. And all three of those aspects are important. So I discovered this new exercise. Or at the very least, it's new to me. It's been around for a while, but it was new to me. But then, so I wanted to research this exercise and why it works. And so I'm kind of going to go just a little bit backwards, where I want to delve into the science first before we talk about the exercise. And so the way you sometimes want to go through and look at your body, there's what they call these planes of motion. And I was not familiar with this. I kind of heard this term thrown around, but I wasn't really certain what people were talking about. When they talk about the sagittal plane, and so basically, what you have to imagine is there is a pane of glass that is positioned to where it's running through and it's dividing your body in half. And so, if you're doing an exercise that, say, like is a bench press or an overhead press, where that exercise is moving along the same, it's moving in parallel with that glass plane, then what you're doing is you're working in that sagittal plane. But then you can go through and you can turn that plane 90 degrees and then it becomes the frontal plane. So now this is any exercise. So it's basically now dividing your body into the front half and the back half. So now any of those exercises that you're doing where you're running parallel with that plane of motion. So something like a lateral raise where your arm is out to the side. If you're doing jumping jacks, it's all side to side movement. So you're not crossing over that pane of glass. And then you can take that same pane of glass, you turn it 90 degrees downward, so that way now you have the transverse plane. So now anything that happens, so say like a twisting motion, or if you have something like a cable fly where you're bringing your arms together, anything where you're not crossing that plane. So we have those three different planes of movement, And really, what you want to do is you want to have a balance between all of these if you want to develop a nice round physique, which is what we've been, or a well-rounded physique is what I should say. So if you want that well-rounded physique, you want to make sure that you're doing exercises within a pretty equal amount within these three different planes. So I was like, okay, all right, I'm starting to understand that now. And so now that we know the rules, now we can go through and we can break those rules. And so there are exercises that you can do that cross the plane. And so it's known as a cross body rotation. And so what this is, and I have to go to my notes, but so the cross body rotation exercises, they build functional strength, power, and this is very important, injury resilience by training your body to move, produce force, and absorb impact across the transverse plane. So basically, what cross body training does is it fills in these critical gaps by targeting the diagonal pathways. So I know that sounds like very, maybe a little too scientific, but it's basically making your left hip being able to communicate with your right shoulder. So it's going through and doing these cross motions. And so the importance of this is so for like athletic transference. Talk to any boxer, he'll tell you that, the power is in the hips, or someone who plays baseball, they'll tell you, that that's where your power comes from is through your torque. And so being able to carry that energy from the floor up, that's going to be very important. These kinetic chains that we're trying to address, where we're getting the body to move seamlessly across from one another. And so by going through and doing this, really what we're doing is we're working on real world injury prevention. So this is talking about spinal safety. It's so you want to go through and you want to build the core muscles that buffer against dangerous, accidental, and twisting under heavy load. The other thing that it helps you out with is deceleration control. So this is where if you're going through and you're slinging a weight from point A to point B, you need to be able to slow that movement down. So that way you're going to incorporate, again, it's that safety into this movement. So because we want to go through what I really want people to do. Yes, I absolutely want you to get strong, but I also want you to be healthy. And
Right.
so, being healthy, so there's going to be a times we talked about this back in, I believe it was in December, where I went out and was shoveling the driveway because we had this massive snowstorm. And in that time, I was never in the optimal position. Yes, I mean, if I could go through and I could bench press, the snow off of the driveway, I'd have been done in 5 minutes. But I'm not able to operate within that frame of motion. So you have to be prepared for when life comes along and knocks you down. So, probably one of the best examples that I can think of is being able, if you have young kids, to be able to go through and pick them up. You're not going to necessarily be able to be in that perfect position in order to lift them up, or maybe you got to lift them up fast because they're running towards the street. So it's doing things like that to go through to strengthen your body so that you're prepared. And then it's also going through and developing those neurological pathways where you're getting your body to communicate with itself, especially like if you have to and you have to go through and cross the central line. They talk about this in stroke patients where they have difficulty transferring from one side to the other because that requires both halves of your brain to communicate with each other. And so sometimes that can cause a problem. So now that I've kind of gone through and explained, okay, this is why we're going to do this. There is an exercise, and as boy, stop me if you've heard this one, because when I heard it, I was like, oh, I'm definitely putting this in the rotation. It's called a gladiator deadlift. Are you
Never,
familiar with this exercise?
no, if I had heard about it, I would have been curious about it and would have wanted to try it.
Okay, good. So again, it's the thing that makes me I'm so surprised by the fact that so here I've been doing this for 12 years and I get excited whenever I come across a new exercise, something that I haven't heard of before. And so then you go through and you do the research on it, and maybe everyone's all working off the same tree. I don't know, or it's they say, hey, this is a good way for us to drive views. But so the research is out there. But so the gladiator deadlift. And so again, what you're going to do, so this can be done with a variety of different weights, and it depends on your skill level, it depends on your health level. But so let's just start with, we'll say with the kettlebells. So basically, you're going to have two kettlebells and you're going to position them on the floor just outside of your feet. And then you're going to reach over with your right hand and you're going to grab the kettlebell that's on the left side. So you're reaching across your body, you're reaching down, you're picking that weight up, and you're returning back to a standing position. Then, when you continue to hold that weight in your right hand, you now reach across with your left hand to grab the right kettlebell, and then you stand back up to an upright position. And then, once you're up in that full upright position, then you set them both directly back down. And so, for the first rep, if you started with your right hand, on the second rep, go through and start with your left hand. And so all you're doing here is, so again, you're crossing that plane of motion. So if I understand all this correctly, we're actually breaking all three planes with a singular movement because we're reaching across our body, we're reaching down, and then we're pulling back up. So I kind of see it as we're breaking all three planes by going through and developing this. So I went through and I started experimenting with this, and I have to say, I mean, I think the results are there. So have you ever done anything similar to this?
No, I haven't. I'm sure I've switched things up. I switch things up as often as I can, and now I want to do that. Right now, I'm having balance issues, so I need to start with very low poundage kettlebells to do that. But I could easily try it out next time I do kettlebells, which should be before I go to bed tonight. So
Okay.
I'll be trying it immediately tonight. But I could see how that would be good, especially now with all my spinal problems. Uh, Anything I can do to improve my balance, and that would definitely improve balance if I could pull it off.
Well, so again, there's going to be different levels where you can go through and you can do this. So I experimented quite a bit with this. And so I was thinking, okay, so the kettlebells, because of the way that they're designed, the handle is higher up than it is, say, with a dumbbell. So it's easier for you to reach down and grab that. But we can actually make this exercise even easier if we go through and we elevate. So, say if you are having back issues, or maybe you're not quite ready to go through and grab those kettlebells yet. So, what you can do is I would just put a chair on either side of you. So that way you're not having to reach as far down to go through and grab that kettlebell and then pull it back, because you're still going through that same motion. But then the lower that you put the weight, the more difficult it's going to become. So I would think that if you go through and you set, and so the issue that I had at my gym is that I didn't have very many kettlebells that were of the same weight. So I had to go pretty heavy because that was all I had available to me. So I kind of started really in fifth gear with experimenting with this. But that got me thinking, okay, well, so if we go through and we elevate these to a higher level, then that's going to make it easier. But then if you want to make the exercise more difficult, what you can do is, so then you can switch to dumbbells, which again, you have to reach down even farther to grab those. But if you're looking for kind of that intermediate level in between the kettlebell and the dumbbell, what I did is I took dumbbells, but I stood them up on their end. So that way I was going through and grabbing that elevated head with, I think it's called a suicide grip, where you're not able to wrap your thumb around it. You're just grabbing the weight. But because of the way that you're pulling it across your body, it's pretty hard for that weight to dump out, from your hand grip. So it's just going through and experimenting with that. And then if you really want, and so eventually if you're getting really heavy and you're like, okay, I'm getting pretty good at this, you can actually go through and stand on a plate or two,
Oh,
which
wow.
elevates you even more. So now you have to reach down even farther to grab that weight. So again, this is where this exercise can be for anyone. So it just depends on what your level of fitness is. It depends on, how tight your hamstrings are. Are you able to, to bend all the way over to grab these things? If you're not, that's okay. Then what we'll do is we'll just go through, we'll elevate it until you can slowly progress to where you need to be.
A month ago, I couldn't pick things up from the floor if they were pushed against the floor. Now I can. And I pick up kettlebells and dumbbells and D weights and all sorts of different configurations that have poundage and do different exercises. So I should be able to do it. It's just
Good.
balance that I need to watch. So I will do it near my bed. So
So another variation. So again, I'm going through and I'm doing my research for this. And then there was one person who had a variation of this, but it was with a barbell. And so again, that's where it's almost kind of counterintuitive, but the heavier the plate is typically in most gyms. I mean, I know they have some weights that are all the same size, but they're just different weights. But I mean, a 45-pound weight is going to be taller than, say, a 25-pound weight. So by going through and lifting more weight, but the bar is more elevated, but that you don't quite have the same amount of movement, but instead what you're doing is you're reaching across, you're grabbing that barbell, which is running a parallel to you on one side. You're going through, picking that up, twisting, and then setting it back down. So it's pretty close to the same exercise, but just slightly the different mechanic. But that's where I really want to go back to refocus on I'm sorry, the deceleration. Yeah, so the deceleration control, because what you have to do is if you go to slinging that thing, it can get out of control really, really quickly, and you could probably end up hurting yourself if you're not careful. So it's
right.
a thing where, again, it is control whenever we lift it up, it's control whenever we shift with it, and then it's control whenever we set it back down. But by going through and doing that, I think that's going to go through. And so again, it's about going through and protecting your spine.
It sounds interesting, and it has the whole gladiator mystique. Even if that's not accurate, the gladiators didn't have it. That make it fit into my personal mythology. So I'm very likely to uh, keep doing that just for those things alone.
But this was one of those things. And so again, boy, I don't want to use the term expert. Everything that I'm bringing here is all just stuff that I've experienced in the real world. It's learning about things and attempting to do practical applications from it. And so as I'm going through and I'm doing this research, I came across a term that I wasn't familiar with. I've actually been working with it unknowingly. But so one of the things that they talk about, that what this is going to help you develop, is what's called anti-rotational core stability. And I
Oh,
was like, oh, I don't know what that is. So I had to dig deeper into it to figure out what that is. And so if you have an exercise that's, say, like a Russian twist, I'll go on record here, any exercise that has an Eastern European country's name in it is designed to torture you. I'm just putting that out there for everyone that's willing to listen. Uh, 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 Bulgarian split squats, those things can piss off. Oh, they're so difficult for me to do. But so you have the Russian twist is basically just where you're going through, you're picking up, say, like a medicine ball, and you're moving from the right to the left and back and forth. So what you're doing is you're intentionally taking that weight from one point to another. So what anti-rotational ability is, where you go through and you tighten everything up and you lock everything in place that keeps you from moving. So that is equally as important to be able to go through. And so you want to be able to do the rotational exercises, but you also want to balance that with anti-rotational exercises. So a really good example of this is some people call it a single-handed farmer's carry. Other people call it a suitcase carry. I think I like the term suitcase carry a little bit better because you can visualize it a little bit more in your mind. Basically, what you're doing is you're just picking up one weight or one dumbbell, one plate, whatever, and you're carrying it in one hand. And whenever you do that, your body instinctively, it wants to fold over to the side that you're carrying it on. So what you're doing is you're telling your body, nope, I'm going to stay upright. So it's an ab exercise because you've got all that core engaged. So what this is doing is that in the event of, if someone were to come along and try to, football. Someone's going to come through and they're going to try to knock you over. But if you can go through and you brace that core, you're going, nope, you're not knocking me over. And so you've braced against that impact. I would have to assume that something like this would also be integral to keeping you from falling. So if you are having a balance issue, am I wrong about that? Or I mean, by going through and engaging your core, does that keep you upright to keep you from falling over?
Yes, doing core exercises helps with flexibility and with strength. One of the things I do every day, and I do use kettlebells and dumbbells and D weights. I don't know if you've ever seen the D weights. They're like the letter D, and they're metal. It's in foam covering, and it just gives
Uh,
the balance of the weight. There was uh, a sporting goods place, I think it was called Dick's, that used to carry them. I've never seen them anywhere else. And now I think Dick's went out of business or they pulled back where their stores are. So I don't even know where to buy them. And I don't know what to look them up under on Amazon or Temu or any one of the places where I get them. But right now, what I'm doing with the kettlebells is I have them on the floor, and the abdominals, in addition to what other abdominals I'm doing, is I'll pick up the weights with my hands and I'll twist back and forth with the kettlebells. Then I'll dip side to side, first one side, then the other side, and then both sides. And then I'll reach down and touch the ground and then hold that down a little bit for a little stretch and then stand back up again. So I'll do that for, let's say 12 sets, and I'll go for 12 reps of each set. And sometimes if I can handle the heavier weight, I'll incorporate the dumbbells. I have plenty of dumbbells, like plenty kettlebell. So I like to get both and the V belts too. So I'll do different things with different bells depending on how much weight I can manage at the time. But I found that that helps.
so with the again, we're talking about the force transfer. We're talking about the spine protection. It's all this sort of stuff, and so again, that's why I thought of you whenever I came across this exercise. I mean, one, I wanted to try it for myself, but then also, yeah, to go through and strengthen that spine to a point where you can go through. And so again, it's really about keeping people healthy is one of the biggest things. And so seeing this on there, so I knew whenever I'm going through and I'm studying all this, and I came across the one guy who was doing this with the barbell. That's where I came through, and so as like, okay, this is as much as whenever I go through and I experiment with new exercises because I'm in a public gym, I like to go through and either be by myself so that way because I can figure out what it is that I'm doing with this. And so in my gym, we have a section that's called the dungeon. That's what I call it. It's just an unofficial term. My gym, before it was a gym, it was like one of those everything's a dollar stores that got converted. So this is basically the back room. So there's no climate control. It's the big roll up doors are there from when they used to bring the pallets in, all that sort of stuff. So it's grungy, it's dirty. But I was like, I knew I can go through here and I can start slinging this barbell around to try to experiment with this exercise. And so I get in there and I'm messing around with it and I do. But this place is it's just trashed. I mean, as far as like the gym goers that were there have gone through and nothing is put away. There's weights scattered all over everywhere. So I got done with the experimenting. I was like, okay, I think I like the kettlebell version better. I'll try to see if I can get to the dumbbell version. But yeah, but I was like, okay, but the barbell version, it's kind of unique. And then I go through and I'm looking around at this place and I'm just like, oh my God. And this was early in the workout. So I was just like, man, my OCD kicked in and I was just like, I can't handle this. And so I went through and I started cleaning up and I started organizing. And so again, I wear an Apple Watch. It goes through, it monitors my activity and how many calories I'm burning, all this sort of stuff. And so I'm going through and so again, sweat is just pouring off of me because it's now, July. And but by the time I got everything put away, And then my watch beeped at me and says, "Hey, you've closed your activity ring," because I was in there for 45 minutes going through and cleaning things up. But again, this is where I'm out of position because I'm going through and I'm picking up the weights and I'm putting them on racks. And so I'm having to move them around and things like that. But by going through and doing that, I ended up having, I mean, a pretty rigorous workout just by going through and cleaning things up. They should pay me to do that. But you know, so it's going through it.
Well,
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
I do that as well. When I used to go looking for DVDs too, I used to like arranging them so there was some sort of order. So I have that eccentricity also.
So also, I assume if you have, you can't have a squat rack and have three 45s on one side and one 45-pound plate on the other.
Correct. I have to straighten them out twice. Well, I used
That's
to
it.
work at a chick called the Olympia Gym, and Lou Ferrigno had worked out there. Arnold had worked out there when in his early days. So it was pretty much like a dump, but it was an effective bodybuilding place, and they had everything messy all over the place. And I used to straighten it out whenever I worked there. And I used to use that as part of my workout as well.
I'm glad I'm not the only one then. So going in there and getting everything all cleaned up and organized. And so again, DOMS, for those who aren't aware, DOMS, stands for delayed onset muscle soreness. And so typically for me, it takes about 2 days for this to, or I should say, about 48 hours for it to really set in. So if I go through and I do a leg day on Monday, it's really on Wednesdays whenever I go through and feel it. But me going through and straightening up that room for 45 minutes, I came out from that and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm kind of worn out. Now I'm sure some of that was probably the heat. Yeah, I was sweating like crazy, but also at the same time, again, 2 days later, I came back and I was like, man, yeah, just about everything sore because I did something that was I was out of my comfort zone, which is important for us to do, and it was testing my muscles in a slightly different way. So here these two things kind of went through and stacked on top of each other. And so, I mean, so I come on here to talk with you. How can I not talk about this?
Well, I'm honored that you found something that might help me and brought it to my attention. And one of the things I like about our conversation is again, even though we both have a lot of experience and we've experimented a lot for our own fitness, we share the journey. That's the Age of Heroes part, and it is ultimately about wellness. Because as you pointed out, whatever body you want to get, whether you want to be a bodybuilder, a powerlifter, a swimmer, or a racer racing in triathlons or whatever you do, that's going to determine what exercises you do. And I remembered something as you were speaking, when you're speaking of Eastern European exercises. I remember when Dragon Door and a guy named Pavel introduced kettlebells. Kettlebells weren't heard of. I'd never heard of them, and nobody I knew had heard of them. And then Dragon Door published a book with routines in it by a guy named Pavel. It took a few years, but then everybody knew what kettlebells were. But yeah, the workouts were torturous.
Absolutely. And so I love working out with kettlebells. And again, everything has its place. There are times where barbells and each is going to have its benefit and each is going to have, it's a little bit of a detractor. But if you go through and you're mixing those up on a regular basis, again, it's going through and shocking those muscles. And to steal a phrase that you use on a regular basis, it's we'll go with what works until it doesn't. And so if you need to go through and change up your routines just by going through and changing, either from kettlebells to dumbbells to machine focus to cable focus and general free weights, just going through. And that's why I don't think there's no reason for anyone to ever get bored at the gym because there's always variations that you can bring in to a tried and true exercise, which is going to put a little bit of different spin on it.
True, and even body weight exercises, if done effectively, can be can produce results. There was something sometimes it's called dynamic tension. Sometimes it comes under isotonic and isometric exercises. It's also called muscle control by some of the old timers, and it's basically just using the mechanics of your body and producing inner strain that you're looking at or inner stress. And you could have nothing in your hands and imagine, really vividly imagine what it would be like to move heavier weights, and you'll get the same result from your body. And they've proven time and again, sports medicine people, that your body doesn't know the difference between something done through the imagination or something done through reality. So I've had times where, for whatever reason, I couldn't get to a gym, I couldn't get the weights, and I found that doing these exercises, although it didn't have the same results as using the weights, it produced good results. It produced tone and it produced size as well.
And boy, just to add on to talking about constantly going through and changing up your routine. So one of the things, what works for me is not necessarily going to work for someone else.
Right.
And so just today, again, I was working out in the dungeon, and I was going through because that's where like the really heavy weights are, and not that I don't lift very heavy very often, but so I was in there and cleaning up, and they had a station set up there for to do deadlifts. I don't do a whole lot of deadlifts anymore, but every once in a while I do like to test myself just to see, the difference. And for whatever reason, and so again, everyone's physiology is going to be slightly different. Maybe your torso is a little bit longer than mine. Maybe your thighs are going to be a little bit longer than mine. But for whatever reason, there are exercises that I don't mentally connect with. And what I don't mentally connect with is a barbell deadlift. So I went through and I had a certain amount of weight on there that was already preloaded because no one was putting away their weights. And I was like, okay, well, let's see if I can do this. And so I went to grab it and went to lift and went, nope, I can't do this. So gave up because I wasn't going to hurt myself. And I was like, all right, let's take off two of these 45s and now let's see if I can do this. And so I was like, yeah, okay, I could lift that, and it was all right, but it was fairly taxing. But then to go through and study the science, then I went through and I put the same amount of weight, but I used a trap bar instead. And the trap bar, so basically, for those watching this, it might be uninitiated. The trap bar, it's a diamond shape that you step inside, and so instead of my hands being pronated. I can never get that. I can never keep that in my. It's pronated and supinated.
Okay.
So okay, so pronated. So that's what you're doing the lift with whenever you're using a barbell, because there's only one way to go through and put your hands on there. But the trap bar, with you inside that, you have a neutral grip. And so now your palms are facing each other. And for whatever reason, I got into that trap bar and lifted the weight, and I was just like, this is light. I mean, this is light work. And so I'm doing reps with that. So just by changing the way that I was gripping the bar and what exercise, so again, it's pretty similar exercise. Just the difference is my hand grip and how I'm going through and positioning it. So sometimes you do have to go through and you have to experiment to figure out what works for you. And so if there's an exercise that you're just not mentally connecting with, there may be a variation of that exercise that you do connect with. But unfortunately, the only way you're going to figure that out is the hard way. You've got to go through and do them all to figure out which ones you connect with.
But that's the fun of going to the gym and trying out exercises. It is breaking not only your physical way of approaching your workouts, but also your mindset. Because we've talked many times and brought up examples of you're not knowing how much weight you have and finding that you can lift something that you couldn't lift before, or you just point out something that you didn't think you could do before just by moving the position of your hands. You're able to do it easily. And that's part of the joy of discovery, and it adds more options to your workout.
Absolutely. And boy, so you brought up something good here, which again, didn't plan this out, but it dovetails perfectly into the other topic that I wanted to talk about tonight. So I have built my program around four different pillars, and the pillars are to develop myself physically, it's to develop myself intellectually, it's to develop myself socially, and also probably I think the most important is emotionally. Going to the gym is my form of therapy. It's the reason why I smile a lot. It's the reason why, and it's allowed me to gain confidence. So one of the pillars that I think sometimes we neglect and maybe this has a little bit of cross between them, but is the intellectual, is the mind. If we just go through and we lump it into that, we put it into the mind. And so uh, again, since we're bodybuilders, what do? We go through, we lift the weight, we carry it, and we set it back down. And so we need to do the same thing mentally. And so again, massage therapists will go through and they'll tell you that we store trauma in the body, and we have to find a way to go through and release that trauma. So before we get this is going to be it's going to be a little hippy dippy, but before we get into that, let me just throw out a few qualifiers that I have experienced personally in my life. So if you're having trouble winding down before bed because you can't get your brain to quiet down, one of the things that they recommend doing is called a brain dump before bed, which sounds disgusting, but it's not what it sounds like. So if you write the stuff down, hey, what have I got to do tomorrow? Okay, so I'm going to go through and I'm going to make this list. And so we're going to go through, we're going to write all this down. I've experienced this a lot whenever I wake up at 3 a.m. and suddenly I have an idea of, hey, how can I solve this second act problem? And I'm sitting there thinking about it. And then once I can come up with it, then I can go back to bed. But so by going through and writing all this down, it goes through and it allows us to release this thing that we've got stored up in our brain. I've experienced this sometimes where it's like one time I had an idea for a business and it just kept rattling around inside my head. And I knew I was never going to have the money to be able to fund this business. But I was like, but let's just write it down what it was going to be. So that way I can free the log jam up and I can start thinking about other things. There's a really great line in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade where Henry Jones Sr. is talking to Indiana and about the three booby traps that they have to solve. And it's in his diary but he can't remember what that is. And Indiana said, you can't remember? I wrote it down in my diary so I wouldn't have to remember it. And as a young man, I always thought that line was kind of like, I don't know if I necessarily believe that. But now that I'm older, I totally get it. Yeah, I understand exactly what he's talking about. So we're going to go through and we're going to write this down. So we sleep better if we have our to-do list. I don't know about you, but I don't know anyone's phone numbers anymore. I know my own. I don't know anyone else's. Why? Because I don't have to remember it because my phone remembers it for me. So they went through and they did a study where they went through and they told people, okay, we need you with this control group. We need you to remember all this information. And then they told this other control group, okay, you're going to take this test, but you're going to have access to like it'll be like an open book test. And so the people who were forced to remember the information, they retained information better than the controlled group that knew that they could look it up elsewhere. So they were less likely to commit it to memory. Well, so if that's true, now let's go through and let's reverse that engineering. Let's reverse our way of thinking. And so writing things down goes through and frees up our brains. So as it turns out, now this is not a new study. This was done back in the 80s, but there was a guy named Dr. James Pennebaker, and he spent decades going through and studying this. So what they did is they had they had two groups. It was college students. And they said, for the first group, we want you to write about the deepest, darkest stuff that has ever happened in your life. And for this other group, we'll go through and, I don't know, describe that tree outside. And so they go through and they start writing all this stuff down. And so the key thing for this is, so someone may be saying, well, I'm not a writer. I don't know what to write about. And so you just sit down and you can even just write, I don't know what to write about. And for me, especially me as a writer, there's no editing. This is just stream of consciousness. You're not worried about punctuation or spelling things right or grammar, all that sort of stuff. You're just writing the stuff down. So the thing is that so they went through and they looked at these two different groups, and the group who was writing about their trauma 20 minutes a day, that's all they asked them to do. Hey, just write for 20 minutes a day. Go through, write all this stuff down. And the group that went through and were writing about their trauma, they didn't go to the doctor. nearly as much with any sort of health problems as much as the people who are just writing about the trees. So when you go through and you start doing this, so I realized I've been doing this for a really long time because I've got files in my computer of stuff, of essays that I've written that no one will ever see the light of day of. I didn't realize what I was doing when I was doing it, but now I understand the science of why you should go through and you should do this thing. So this is me going through it and writing, and just you're getting it out of your system. And so they say that when you go through and you start this process, if you've never done this before, you're going to get to a point where you're going to start to feel anxiety and all that. And yeah, because you're unearthing all of this trauma that you've kept stored in your system. And if you do that, then you just go through and you just keep going and just keep writing. And so again, it's 20 minutes a day. Maybe this works, maybe it doesn't, but people use Facebook, where it's, which there you're even kind of self-editing, but we've all seen the vague book posts where people go through and they're talking about stuff without actually talking about it. And I've talked with some people about this. Oh, so it's like writing a letter to someone and then setting it on fire. And I was like, no, you can't do that, because then if you do, you mentally know, hey, I can't go back and get that information again. But if you go through and you take that information, you write it down, you lock it away somewhere, you know you can go retrieve that information if you need to. So I've been doing this for a while and I actually feel really, really good about it. And so, again, to bring it back to what you and I do, man, it's no different. You go through, you pick up that heavy weight, okay? And then you carry it, and then you got to set it back down, man. You have to, and who, man, you've told me, you've had to tell me to grant myself grace whenever I feel bad, whenever I'm not where I need to be. And that's what I'm trying to do. So setting the burden down. And man, I know it is a hard thing for people to do. And I've had to do it myself. So this is where, oh man, uh, my apologies. Um,
No, this is important.
yeah, it is. And we have to find a way to set those burdens down. And if you can go through and you can do that, even if it's just by doing something simple like 20 minutes a day to go through and release that. We come on here and we talk about health and we talk about well-being. And June was Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's kind of one of those things that should be carried, throughout the whole year, because men, we don't have people to talk to, or we're told, be a man, toughen up, don't show your emotions, all that sort of stuff. And I think we're coming out of that into hopefully what is kind of a new age of what defines manliness. And so my hope, the same as going through and teaching people how to do a gladiator deadlift, yeah, that's important, but I feel this is equally as important too, to find a way to go through, say, you sometimes that burden is pushed upon us even though we didn't ask for it, and you carry it, for as long as you need to. And then, but you also have to know when to set that burden down. And then once you can do that, once you can set that burden down, man, you're so much lighter and you're ready to fly. So I'm sorry, I know I kind of took over there for just a little bit. So I'm I'm curious to get your take on this. Have you ever experienced anything like this? I mean, is this
Similar. And these days I have a difficult time with I can barely see sometimes with my eyes and ailments. But I do something very similar. I learned how to do this when I had something like a near-death type of experience, where I was reviewing my life and seeing different patterns. And it wasn't sequential. It went out of order, but I was able to see things out of order that I wasn't able to see sequentially in my mind. So after that happened to me, because of the insights that I gained, I decided to do it every day. So every day I either review my life consciously or I let whatever pops up in my unconscious pop up and I review that. And I think about it and I experience it and I'm able to let go of things. Like a lot of things that are traumatic happen when you're a child or very young. So you're experiencing this through the eyes of a child, but if you look at it through the eyes of an adult, you become an adult, it's not a big deal. Or it's not as big a deal as you made it out to be when you were a child. So you can let go with a new understanding, looking at it with new eyes. And that's one of the things I found that works for me. And I meditate several times a day. And although I do plan things during my meditation, there are other things I just let come unplanned. So whatever my mind or my emotions or my feelings or my memory want to show me or uh, tell me, I leave myself receptive to doing that. But and I'm finding as I'm older too, I can let go of things. Like I wanted to travel when I retired, and this is not the type of world that you can easily travel in anymore. And there's all these issues with travel, so I had to let go of that. And some things I can't do anymore for whatever reason. So I had to let go of that. And I don't let go of it with a feeling of sadness. It's just that this isn't going to happen, or it's not likely to happen now. So I'm not going to let it torment me. And there are other things I can do that I will enjoy just as much. And so I allow myself to get excited about doing those things rather than things that I can't do. And it's freeing yourself because we beat ourselves up way too much and we take responsibility for way too much sometimes. So I found that doing something and you do one thing, it works very well for you, and I'm sure will work for many others. And I do something else that works very well for me, and hopefully it can help somebody else as well. But you're right, you have to let that go with your burdens. I have millions of books because I used to read a book a day for decades. Now I can't read a book a day. I can barely see the lines on the pages. And also, there's not enough years left for me to read even a book a week. I have way too many books that I've collected. We had a bookstore at one point, so all the books from there are part of what we have. So now we're finding homes for the books. I give them away in my town. I give them away to friends who are nearby. I've mailed books to people who are interested. Because again, I enjoyed this. I treasured it. It meant a lot to me. I carried it with me for my whole life. But now it's no longer part of my reality. And if I don't do something with it, it'll just leave a mess for when I'm no longer here for somebody else to handle. Why should I want to burden them with that? So yeah, what you're sharing is phenomenally important, and maybe there is a way we could deal with it. I'm starting a new show based on meditation and like different types of thinking and altered states. And Michael Belushi also has a program, Olympian Mind, Olympian Body, on the channel. He has been exploring New Thought. Are you aware of New Thought?
No, I'm not.
It's an American form of thinking that gave us like the secret and the law of attraction and things like that, where basically you have a greater ability to affect reality than you think. And because of this power you have over shaping reality, you need to start taking responsibility for the reality that you're creating. So again, there are a lot of pros and cons of doing that, but anything I think that promotes taking responsibility for your reality is a good thing. Some of the UFO groups I deal with, one of them, Denarius, I've been interacting with them for over 50 years on and off. They have a way of thinking where they take responsibility for everything that happens in our world. Somehow, it's for a reason. The reason has something to do with us. So I like that. So I'm rambling, but yeah, I'll invite you on one of those mind shows, and we'll talk about it. We'll explore and see where that journey takes us. And I agree, it's just as important as optimal wellness, physical strength, and athletic ability.
And Yes, absolutely. And so again, this is where I go back to, um, if it works or if it doesn't, it's 20 minutes out of your day that
Right,
was probably better spent than doom scrolling on the internet and arguing with strangers, you know? But whenever so it took me a little bit to kind of wrap my head around this as far as yeah, again, being a writer, that was kind of one of the hardest things was to not go through and edit myself. And so a lot of times it's not even going back and rereading what you have written. And so again, it's if you don't know what to write about, again, you can even start with that, saying I don't know what to write about. But I think that it's a free writing association is what a lot of people go through, and they've done it in other ways where you have no idea what you're gonna go, and you just let the pen kind of carry you wherever you need to. So whether you're using a pen, whether you're using a keyboard, I personally use a keyboard, but just to go through and whenever I was going through and writing all this down, and then once I came up with going, well, okay, yeah, this is really no different than going through and lifting weights, and much the same way that you were talking about how to go through and if you can imagine yourself, lifting those weights and imagining the tension on your body. So now imagine that tension that you're carrying in your mind. And
right.
so if you can go through and you can release that, again, I've experienced this, and the reason why I'm such a big advocate for it is because I've seen evidence of this. Again, talking about, the business that I was never going to make, but just, hey, let's put this down on paper just so I can quit thinking about it. To go through and once I can go through and solve that problem, and again, if I make that list, if I know, hey, I need to do this throughout the day, and once you've got that list to work off of, then it allows your mind to think about the more important things. And so if you've got that trauma that you've been carrying for a really long time, yeah, and I do believe that there is something to that about how we go through and we store that trauma within our body. I do think that there's some sort of metaphysical, where they've seen whether so basically if you're going through and you're carrying that trauma, you are constantly in a fight or flight response.
Right.
And so if you're in that or fight or flight or freeze, but basically you're now flexing the whole time. And you can only hold that for so long before you need to be able to go through and relax. It's kind of there was a study done where the the human mind can't tell the difference between seeing something on TV or experience it in real life. It's the reason why we get scared at horror movies, even though we know we're safe. Nothing's coming out of that screen, but we're still freaked out by it. Or it's the reason why the elderly like watching the same soap operas over and over again because, oh, I've got to see my stories because they see those people on the screen as their friends. You and I going here and talking right now, even though it's not the same as being able to sit down with each other face to face, but yet we're able to see each other, we're able to talk, and so I'm getting that oxytocin or serotonin. I can never keep them all straight, but my brain's happy because, oh, hey, look, I get to see my friend. And so if it's no different than that, then if we can find a way to go through and release ourselves from that and allow us to get at a calming state. I mean, it's no different than if you're pushing yourself too hard, burning the candle at both ends, and your sleep starts to get erratic, and then suddenly, next thing you know, you're sick. So physically, we have seen how this can tear a person down. Well, mentally, it's the exact same thing, or at least I consider it to be the same thing. And I've been in situations where I've been physically exhausted, and I've been in situations where I've been mentally exhausted. Mentally exhausted is so much worse. I would rather take physically tired any day of the week, but where your brain just turns to pudding and you can't think anymore. But so again, I want to say that this is classified as intellectual. Maybe it's a little bit emotional. Again, I think it might be a little bit of both. But if we can go through and we can give people this tool to go through and hopefully kind of regulate them and so that way they can regulate their emotions, then it improves their lives. So I do think that there's something to it. I advocate for it, and then hopefully it works, and if it doesn't, well, it costs you 20 minutes out of your day.
I would love to explore this further with you, and I will invite you as soon as I have a schedule and
Sure.
work further on patients. So maybe once every 2 or 3 months, you could be the focal person on that, to talk about it. And this will learn from a lot of different people. But it's true. Working with the mind is just as important as working with the body, and even more important, maybe. I work with dreams also. I used to write them down, but now again, writing is a problem and reading is a problem. So I don't, but I remember them. And we have an amazing computer inside our head that creates like a holodeck. It creates 3D realities where sometimes we're who we are, sometimes we're other people, sometimes we're different versions of ourselves. We're have different living situations, different relationship situations. It's really amazing what realities your mind can create. And I know that since I've been doing mental exercise and putting as much of stress on them as I have the physical body exercises, my dreams have been much less chaotic and much more meaningful. And in my dreams, I don't have Parkinson's. So that's an added plus. Also, I don't have spinal problems in my dreams. So I get to experience life as I experienced it pretty much before. So again, there's value to be taken from them if you decide to value them. And if you're afraid of them or don't want to explore them, that's okay. It's your right to live your life the way you want. You really lose out on so much, and you have less options when dealing with situations with somebody who explores and experiments.
Very good point. Very good point.
Wow, this has been an awesome and intense conversation. I'm looking forward to the next one. I always look forward to our conversation.
Me too. Yeah, and so again, hopeful. I think we did a pretty good job there. As I don't want to strain my rotator cuff, patting myself on the back. But yeah, so I think we got the physical in there. I think we got the intellectual in there. So yeah, a little bit of both. And so hopefully the viewers that are watching this, man, I hope we can go through and hopefully we found a way to go through and improve your lives.
I'll add one more thing before we wrap up for the day. Sometimes these experiments will lead you to places you didn't think you'd ever go or realize things you never thought you realized. I always thought I was something of because I'm eccentric and I try new things, I thought that I strayed very far from my conditioning. But I did ancestor work. One of our frequent guests is the past life lady, and she wrote a book on ancestor work. So I decided I never really tried this in this way before. So I did every single exercise in the book. And I gave myself a couple of months to try the exercise. And what I was left with was the reality that despite all my eccentricities and my experimental nature and my wide wanderings on different spheres of my reality, my apple did not fall far from the family tree. And I had that realization that I was like Conan in the respect that Conan spent most of his time away from Samaria, but everywhere he went, he was a Sumerian. And he was the exemplar for being a Sumerian, even though he didn't spend his time there that much anymore. And wherever I went, I carried this Greek thing with me that had to do with my early programming, but I've always kept that. And then once you realize that you're not as um, different from your family as you thought you were, then it's again, well, what did I change about things? What did I explore? And even that wasn't far from the tree. I began the love of heroic fantasy and sword and sorcery, for instance. But I had the mythology to ground that on from my early programming or conditioning or raising. So again, it brings you to different places. You get different perspectives. You look at things in a new way, and you can let go. There's a lot of our ill will and ill feelings that we carry are blaming other people. And then when you realize by doing this type of work that they're fallible human beings just like you are, and in many ways they've done a better job with things than you have, and it doesn't help you or them or anybody by blaming where they're just the fallible human beings that did the best they can. And once you see that most people, not all people, but most people are actually doing the best they can, it's easy to let go of a lot of negativity and negative feelings and negative memories. And life becomes a lot more enjoyable and livable. And on that,
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
thank you, Ryan. You're incredibly awesome. I'm blessed to have you on my life path, and I enjoy our conversations. I enjoy your creative works, and I really do hope that your creative works are able to take root and expand again, because I really loved where you were going with that. And we've got conversations about that in the past too, and I'm sure we'll have some more in the future. How can people contact you, and what do we have to look forward to? Any books on the horizon? Any events on the horizon?
Yes. So how you promote me on Facebook is probably the absolute best way. My recommendation though is if people want to get at me directly, mention you. So that way, because I get spam a lot of times, and in order to make sure that I'm dealing with a real person, to mention you. And boy, funny you should mention that. So since the last time that we talked, boy, I mean, like Zeus's lightning bolt. So I've been working on a concept for a novel that I had been developing since September. And I felt like I needed to step away from it, not because I thought it was bad or anything like that, but I just, hey, I need to lock this away for a little bit so I can come back in with fresh eyes. So that way I can gain, like you said, a different perspective on it, make sure there's no holes or anything like that. And so I was like, well, let's go over here and let's work on this other project. And, so that way it can distract my mind. Let's set that aside. And so, because I've changed my process up a little bit now, I actually wrote the date down. Okay, the inspiration for this actually happened on June 13th, is when I had the actual idea for it. And I've spent the last month. And it's good that I'm going to the gym, because I have just been sitting at my computer otherwise, whenever I'm not at work, and just, laying out these ideas. And so what's probably going to end up being my ninth novel came together far, far quickly than I anticipated, where this thing kind of showed up fully formed. So that's probably going to end up being my next one. So yeah, I do have at the bare minimum of two more novels on the horizon. Not quite ready to talk about them yet. But hopefully, I'm going to have those ready for to be available for purchase whenever I attend the Prior Creek, which is my local comic convention, the Prior Creek Comic Convention, and I think that's probably going to be in March. So I'm really hoping to have both of those done by that time. So fingers crossed. We'll see how it goes. But so yeah, I've been in a creative boom. So when I talk about waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, going, how do I solve that second act problem? I've been doing that in real life, but I'm working on my way of getting through it. So yeah, I do have a lot of stuff on the horizon that I'm really excited about.
Fantastic. And whenever you want to promote this stuff, just let me know, and we'll create a program where you can share it with a wider audience and say what you want to say. And I look forward to that as well.
That sounds great. Yeah, I'd look forward to that.
Okay, thank you, my friend. Be well. And until our next conversation, you're awesome.
Thank you, sir. Right back at you.
Thanks.